In a world where there is so much wealth, with modern cities and ample resources, how can we still have so much poverty?
And this administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America.
The world's poorest countries remain imprisoned, enslaved, and in chains. They are trapped in the prison of poverty. It is time to set them free.
The global food crisis that's about to burst in 2023 is going to be far worse than most people dare to imagine. This is not a conspiracy, a possibility, or a forecast for the future. It is happening right now. In fact, for years, the United Nations has been warning about the rise of global hunger and urging global leaders to do something about it.
We were a generation of people who had been in World War II. So when a war against poverty was launched, it was typical of all of us at that time to think of this war, the war against poverty, in terms just like the war against Hitler.
They've been trying to fight poverty so long. For decades, they're talking about it. So how long does it take to actually destroy it? How long does it take? Why has it suddenly become an enigma? Why is it so difficult?
In 2014, during the week that marked the 50th anniversary of LBJ's War on Poverty, O'Reilly again said that true poverty, as opposed to make-believe poverty, is being driven by personal behavior, which included, according to him, addictive behavior, laziness, apathy. O'Reilly has indeed repeatedly called poor people lazy, and the subtext of his remarks is that many poor people are pathologically and undeservedly dependent on the government dole.
Poverty is not an accident. It doesn't just happen. It doesn't happen because of where you live. It doesn't happen because of how you were born. No. Poverty is not a result of our laziness. No, there's a lot of people who work hard and are poor. In fact, there are more hard-working poor people in the world than lazy rich people.
Now, the U.S. economy has shown some signs of recovery after the Great Recession, and official unemployment rates have dipped. But the economic outlook for many working families remains to look bleak. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, nearly one-third of working families don't earn enough to make ends meet. Most American workers are able to find jobs, but those jobs are often low-paying.
People who work many times in a full-time job, but who cannot afford to live in the area where they're employed. These are cities that on paper might look prosperous, where the economy is doing well and unemployment rates are very low. But behind the statistics, a growing number of people have no choice but to sleep in their cars.
As night falls, hatchbacks and camper vans arrive at this car park. Their drivers have no fixed address. Their car has become their home. 40% of them have a job, a figure that is rising every year.
Japan has some of the longest working hours in the world. Nearly a quarter of Japanese companies have their employees work more than 80 hours of overtime per month. Those extra hours are often unpaid.
They said the people are lazy. No, but there are organizations that are doing it.
Workers are working harder for less pay and in worse conditions. And that is because the economic system is rigged this way.
Poverty is not from God, and it's not an accident. It's created by certain people.
We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is.
The Great Reset Agenda. Build back better. Stakeholder capitalism. The public-private partnership. This is all related to the government's plan to make you poor.
The reason for poverty is not far-fetched. The reason for poverty in the world is the manipulation of their currency by a select few.
No matter where you go in the world, the money is controlled by the banking system. They decide if people eat or if they don't eat. Who's a billionaire and who lives on less than $1 a day? He who controls the money controls the world, and a very few control the money.
Central banks are banking cartels which have gone into partnership with the respective governments in the countries where they operate. And they've been given monopolistic power over the creation of the nation's money supply. That's what the politicians handed to them as a gift, you might say, for the partnership. Now, in return, what did the bankers do for the politicians? They promised to create money out of nothing, now that they've got this legal power to do it anytime the government needs it.
Here's another very interesting thing. What work does the Fed do? The Fed doesn't do any work, just prints money.
Simply flooded the system with money.
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it. We did.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally. So we, as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digitally. And we do that by buying treasury bills or bonds or other government guaranteed securities. And that actually increases the money supply.
The Federal Reserve prints money on a debt-based system which creates scarcity. But it puts a group of insiders in a position of having access to all the data about the economy when we don't. So you have a small group of bankers who understand the data on how the money works in the economy, and it gives them the ability to print money in a way that the insiders are protected and everybody else is drained.
So in that, they control nations. Think about it. Now you can understand why the president will say, we only need 500 billion for something. And then the Congress says, no, you need 2 trillion. Where's that money going to come from? Borrowed from the Fed. So all the money is loaned to the country.
Under this fractional reserve scheme, we inevitably become debt slaves to a ruling class of financial elite. Not because they are better or smarter than anyone else, but because they have rigged the system to benefit themselves at the expense of most people on the planet.
The problem is we have a privately owned central bank system disguised as a government-owned system. Now, if you look in the telephone book here in the Washington, D.C. area, you look up for Federal Reserve in the blue government pages, it's not there. It's in the white pages right next to Federal Express. It's a privately owned central bank.
That's why every time your country is getting better, the people are working hard, and money is coming in, and they're prospering, suddenly they have a hit on their currency. Some clandestine group takes a shot at the currency and destroys it. Why? Because that's how they get rich.
Let's set up a game of Monopoly and you want to buy Park Place. What I can continually do is just print money, give myself more money, lower the value of your money by printing more. No matter how hardworking you are or how successful you are, I can always end up buying you for free.
What they do is they pull the fishing line in. They push interest rates up. Now, fewer people, are taking out loans, and they make the criteria for having a loan from the bank stronger anyway. And also, now, as interest rates have gone up, a larger part of people's income is going to pay back the extra interest and not being circulated in buying things. Suddenly, there's nothing like as much money in circulation, and therefore, fewer things are being bought. companies start to go down in terms of their profits, they start to shed jobs, and they start to go out of business. People lose their jobs, they can't pay the mortgage anymore of the big house they took out in the good times. Now what the banks are doing is starting to reel the fishing line in, because as they go bankrupt, companies and individuals, the banks get the real wealth, the property, the land, the resources that they had signed to them for lending merely figures on a screen. Now this economic cycle of fishing line out, fishing line back, lots of units in circulation, pull them in, has been going on for centuries. And what it's done, it's stolen and accumulated the real wealth of the world in the hands of the few.
That's the reason for poverty of nations. The manipulation of their currency.
This evil agenda is being pushed through policies and regulations implemented by leaders of nations to continually keep their citizens in poverty.
The first week of April, the Federal Reserve begins the rollout of their new central bank digital US dollar. That's right. It's called the FedNow program, and it's going to replace your paper currency. Not overnight, but it's moving in that direction. And it will move the United States to a cashless society, a surveillance state where every transaction will be tracked and cataloged, where, as the Fed describes it, money that's in your account can even expire and become unusable. That's right, just like that Red Lobster gift card that you never used. China's already doing it. We already have a template for it. And many U.S. government museums, national parks, historical sites are no longer accepting paper dollars. And many American businesses have already gone cashless as well. They'll pretend it's all about convenience, but really, it's all about control.
The reality, as the financial system gets more controlling and more invasive, it's a little bit like bringing up a corral around us. And CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and vaccine passports or digital IDs are sort of the last shutting of the gate. It's hard for many people to imagine the risks here because we're so used to living with financial transaction freedom, and we don't understand that when this gate closes on us, we literally will be sitting in a system where the central banks believe that our assets belong to them, and they can dictate where we can spend money and what we can spend money on.
Policies such as negative income tax have been proposed to encourage individuals on lower incomes and benefits to seek out work, as it would be financially advantageous for them to do so.
Today, everybody thinks taxation is normal. It's not normal. It came at a certain point in history for every country where it's done. And find out who was responsible for it. Satan, the devil. Why? Because taxation is a sign of ownership. And to make that effective, you must have no personal property. They have to rob you of your personal property. You will have nothing. And that's why they come in from the back door and selling the idea that you own nothing but you'll be happy. In fact, some organizations have already bought into it.
With the plans of the deep state, the agenda is to ensure you own nothing. And they want to control your decision making by depending on them. They orchestrated food shortages in the world, increased taxation, artificial scarcity with inflation, to further increase unemployment rate around the world.
Many are forced to buy seasonal seeds from multinational corporations, meaning that every year they need to buy more or fail to produce their crops. Food production is now part of a global system designed to generate capital, not ensure food security.
Despite unprecedented demand at food banks in some areas, more than 10 million hens are estimated to have been culled due to the claim of COVID-19 related slaughterhouse shutdowns.
By now, over 100 million chickens and turkeys have already been wiped out by the bird flu pandemic that's gripping the United States and Europe. And experts are warning that the death toll will continue to grow now that cold weather is arriving.
The pork industry has warned that more than 10 million pigs could be culled by September for the same reason. Closure of meat plants due to coronavirus means the population of hens and pigs.
We're facing a food pricing problem that's creating havoc around the world. Well, if we don't get on top of this thing quickly, and I don't mean next year, I mean this year, you will have a food availability problem.
Well, the UK has also struggled with inflation over the past year, in large part because of energy costs, the same driver of inflation in the EU. But other factors, including Brexit and a standoff between suppliers and grocers, has created something more alarming in recent weeks: visible food shortages. Take a look.
Not much here. Empty boxes, a handful of tomatoes, a few cucumbers. Enough to make a salad, but certainly not enough for all the salads people in this London neighborhood wanted to make. Stores have put buying limits on fresh groceries. It's a problem for families and for restaurants.
The shortage makes us to change from tomato-based to white-based sauces, because what can we do? We have to make a profit.
Counting their losses, the farming community of Nagi was invaded by a group of 30 bandits armed with AK-47 rifles just hours before. They are the latest victims of a spate of robberies and theft sweeping the northwest state of Zamfara. Most communities here rely on agriculture as a way of life, but with banditry on the rise, without the intervention of the federal government, local leaders in these villages say they will continue to bear their pain and loss.
This is part of the cause of shortage of food in the world. They sponsored terror to their farms. And so many farmers found themselves faced with armed bandits, terrorists, and they fled the farms. And the next thing you knew, no more rice, very expensive, beans, very expensive, tomatoes, very expensive. Everything became expensive because of shortage. So these are things that are being manipulated. Plus the killing, massive killing of pigs and cows and chickens. These are terrible things that are happening.
Haiti. Hunger is at catastrophic levels, and the country is at a breaking point. Thousands upon thousands of people in the capital's impoverished Cité Soleil area have dangerously little access to food and are on the brink of starvation, the United Nations says.
But you can see from the Word of God, Psalm 33 and verse number 5, that the earth is full of the goodness of God. So if it is full of the goodness of God, why isn't everybody having a piece of this goodness? Because bad rulers destroy the prosperity of their nation. Good rulers always, good leaders always make their nation prosper. And the bad ones destroy its prosperity.
We know the problem, we've analysed the problem. You are being kept poor on purpose. It's not because you're a failure, it's not even because you've done anything wrong, it's systemic failings that lead to your problem.
Enough is enough to modern day slavery.
And we are the ones in position to do something about it. He says, pray for kings, leaders of these nations, and for all that are in authority. Then he guarantees us the results, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. That means fraud will not gain the mastery in our cities, in our countries. Don't say in your country everything is peaceful. I said it's planned to be global. Pray now.
For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ.
Would use these weapons of our warfare that are not carnal to bring down those fortresses by the power of the living Christ.